was snatched up while he was at a Target, working at a Target, 17-year-old American citizen, hauled off. He's crying. He's saying to the officers, "I'm an American citizen. I can prove it." They haul him off. And then, perhaps at some point, they realize that they've made a mistake. They literally dump him on the ground. Not where he was working, but down the road in front of a Walmart. And you can all look at this. It's all over the internet. And they literally slam him to the ground in front of a Walmart, not even where he was taken up, and they drive away.
3 senior federal prosecutors have resigned. They did not resign because of a change in administration. They did not resign because of retirement. They resigned because the Justice Department ordered them to target the widow of a woman shot dead by an ICE agent.
He has now resigned. 3 Minnesota federal, I'm reading from the article, 3 Minnesota federal prosecutors resigned over the Justice Department's push to investigate the widow of a woman killed by an ICE agent and its reluctance to investigate the shooter, according to people with knowledge of the decision. And the article goes on to say Mr. Thompson's resignation came after senior Justice Department officials pressed for a criminal investigation into the actions of the widow of Renee Nicole Good, the Minneapolis woman killed by an ICE agent last Wednesday. Mr. Thompson, 47, a career prosecutor, objected to that approach.
The Department of Homeland Security says they are following the law. The Department of Homeland Security says they are targeting criminals. But the evidence in the congressional record shows they are targeting American citizens, and they are lying about it to the United States Congress. The Department of Homeland Security, under the leadership of Secretary Kristi Noem, has formally stated to the House Judiciary Committee that Immigration and Customs Enforcement does not detain United States citizens. That is a lie. It is not a misstatement. It is not an exaggeration. It is a documented falsehood delivered to the oversight body of the United States government. The claim that the federal government does not detain its own citizens based on their appearance or ethnicity is contradicted by the government's own behavior, by the testimony of members of Congress, and by the resignation of career prosecutors who refuse to participate in the cover-up of state violence. When a government agency tells the legislative branch that something is not happening, and we have the names and the dates and the locations of it happening, that is a lie. We must look at the specific language used by the administration to shield itself from scrutiny. In a formal response to an inquiry by the House Judiciary Committee regarding the detention of U.S. citizens, the Department of Homeland Security provided a written response. Representative Jamie Raskin of Maryland, the ranking member of the Oversight Committee, read that response into the official record. The Department of Homeland Security stated, quote, "We do not detain U.S. citizens," end quote. This is the government's official position. They claim that the dragnet currently operating in states like Minnesota and Washington is precise, legal, and restricted only to non-citizens. Secretary Noem stated on television that they are arresting criminal illegal aliens. Representative Harriet Hageman, defending the administration during committee proceedings, stated that the people being arrested are, quote, "the worst of the worst of the worst of the worst," end quote.
These truly are the worst of the worst of the worst of the worst. And if the leadership in Minnesota and these other sanctuary states actually cooperated with the Trump administration, you would not see the kinds of activities that they have been having to undertake in order to protect the citizens of the United States of America.
The lie is the assertion of precision. The lie is the denial of collateral damage. The lie is the blanket statement, "We do not detain U.S. citizens," which serves as a legal shield to prevent congressional oversight. The evidence proves that the Department of Homeland Security is detaining United States citizens. This evidence comes directly from the congressional districts where these operations are taking place. Representative Raskin reported to the committee that he became aware of this issue not through a report, but through a constituent. A United States citizen in his district was detained by ICE for 5 days. They did not get a release until Christmas Day.
Across the country. And I got interested in this because one of my constituents was detained for 5 days by ICE. we didn't get her released until Christmas Day. A U.S. citizen was detained. That's what woke me up to this issue. It turned out Ms. Jayapal has been on this for a while, so we wrote a letter.
This was a citizen held against their will by an agency that claims it does not detain citizens. Representative Pramila Jayapal provided even more forensic detail regarding the scope of these detentions. She entered into the record documentation from journalists who have identified over 170 Americans who have been detained by ICE. These are not clerical errors. These are 170 instances of the federal government stripping liberty from its own people. The most harrowing piece of forensic evidence regarding the detention of citizens occurred in Minneapolis just 48 hours before the congressional hearing. Representative Jayapal detailed the incident involving a 17-year-old American citizen. This teenager was working at a Target store. ICE agents snatched him up. He was crying. He told the officers, quote, "I'm an American citizen. I can prove it," end quote. The agents hauled him off. When they realized they had made a mistake, when they realized they had kidnapped an American child, they did not process him. They did not return him to his place of employment. They literally dumped him on the ground in front of a Walmart down the road. They slammed him to the ground and drove away. This is not law enforcement. This is a catch-and-release kidnapping of a United States citizen. Furthermore, we have evidence regarding the killing of Renee Nicole Good. Representative Emily Randall of Washington testified that we all watched from our phones as ICE agents killed Renee Nicole Good in the streets of Minneapolis.
Across the country, we all watched from our phones as ICE murdered Renee Nicole Good in the streets of Minneapolis last week. The American people are fearful and angry. They're terrified. They're furious that the Trump administration is unleashing lawless agents.
The administration claims these operations are safe. Yet, Representative Randall reports that ICE agents are raiding active forest firefighting operations in her district and shooting people dead who dare to protest. The forensic evidence also reaches into the data of the arrests themselves. While Secretary Noem claims they are arresting thousands of, quote, criminal illegal aliens, reporting from the New York Times, cited by Nicholas Kristof, shows that the rate of deportations for people with violent criminal convictions has doubled, but the rate for people with no criminal record has gone up more than 6 times. The evidence proves that the dragnet is not targeting, quote-unquote, the worst of the worst. It is sweeping up anyone in its path, including American citizens, and the administration is falsifying the data to cover it up. We must analyze how this power is being exercised and controlled. This is not accidental incompetence. This is systemic design. Representative Randall revealed a new report from NBC regarding how ICE trains its agents. The agency uses artificial intelligence to determine which agents need more training. The reporting shows that in instances where individuals wrote about how badly they wanted to be an ICE officer, they got less training. Consider the implications of that power dynamic. The federal government is identifying the most eager, perhaps the most aggressive candidates, the ones who desperately want the power to detain and deport, and they are deliberately providing them with less instruction on the law, less instruction on de-escalation, and less instruction on constitutional rights. Representative Randall noted that local police officers in Minneapolis receive more training than these federal agents. The control mechanisms extend to the equipment and tactics. These agents are masked. Representative Garcia pointed out that no other law enforcement agency has masked individuals working for them in this manner. They are busting down doors without warrants. They are rolling up on schools during lunchtime. They are entering hospitals and childcare centers. This is a display of power designed to terrorize, not to investigate. The power is also being exerted through military force. The Pentagon has ordered 1,500 troops from the 11th Airborne Division in Alaska to prepare for deployment to Minnesota. These are troops specialized in operating in -8-degree weather. The mayor of Minneapolis, Jacob Frey, stated clearly that crime is dramatically down in his city and that they do not need federal agents. He stated, quote, "You know what's causing more chaos? Having these thousands of ICE agents and border control and apparently military even potentially on our streets," end quote. This is the federal government overriding local control. This is the federal government imposing a military presence on a compliant city that does not want them. And the ultimate control mechanism is the silencing of dissent within the Justice Department itself. Representative Jayapal entered into the record a New York Times article detailing the resignation of 3 federal prosecutors in Minnesota. Mr. Thompson, a career prosecutor appointed acting U.S. attorney by Donald Trump in May 2024, resigned. He resigned because senior Justice Department officials pressed for a criminal investigation into the widow of Renee Nicole Good, the woman killed by ICE. The government killed a woman. And then the government attempted to use the power of federal prosecution to criminalize her grieving widow. That is an abuse of power so severe that a Trump-appointed prosecutor walked away from his career rather than enforce it. The defense of these actions was presented most vigorously by Representative Harriet Hageman of Wyoming. Her argument is that the individuals being targeted are dangerous criminals who have already received due process and must be removed for the safety of the community. Representative Hageman provided a detailed list of individuals arrested during, quote, Operation Metro Surge in Minnesota. She cited a 47-year-old from Burma convicted of third-degree criminal sexual conduct using force. She cited a 59-year-old from Laos convicted of 2 counts of rape in Ohio. She listed a 42-year-old from Laos convicted of first-degree criminal sexual conduct with a child. She listed a 26-year-old from Ecuador convicted of robbery and assaulting a police officer. Her argument is that these individuals have final orders of removal. She stated, quote, "These are not people that I want to defend. They do not belong here," end quote. She argues that the Democrats are refusing to protect citizens from violent thugs because of sanctuary policies. Representative Chip Roy of Texas supported this defense, arguing that under the Immigration and Nationality Act, any person who illegally enters the country shall be detained. He argues that the Biden administration ignored this law, and the current administration is simply returning to the rule of law. We dismantle this defense by looking at the law and the facts presented in the very same hearing. First, the existence of violent individuals does not legally justify the detention of United States citizens. The defense argues that because there are rapists to be caught, ICE is justified in snatching a 17-year-old American boy from a Target store and dumping him at a Walmart. That is not the law. The Fourth Amendment protects citizens from unreasonable search and seizure. Representative Johnson of Georgia noted that the Supreme Court has allowed for Kavanaugh stops, where agents stop people based on appearance, effectively creating a second-class citizenship. But even under the loosest interpretation of immigration authority, there is no legal defense for detaining a U.S. citizen for 5 days, as Representative Raskin described. Second, the defense claims they are targeting the, quote, worst of the worst. But Representative Nadler of New York presented the administration's own data. That data shows that only 5% of immigrants who are detained have criminal histories with serious felonies. 70% have no criminal history whatsoever. If Representative Hageman's list was representative of the entire operation, the statistics would look different. But her list is a curated selection used to justify a dragnet that is 95% focused on people who are not serious felons. As Representative Nadler stated, if the administration was actually just targeting convicted felons, there would be no objection. But they are not. They are deporting people with ongoing asylum cases, which Secretary Mayorkas previously admitted is illegal. Third, regarding the rule of law defense, Representative Roy argues that the law says shall be detained. However, the law also provides for asylum. Representative Nadler pointed out that it is illegal to deport someone with an ongoing asylum case. The administration is bypassing the immigration courts. Representative Hageman insists these people have final orders of removal, but we know from the reporting on the ground that people are being picked up who are simply neighbors or church members. Nicholas Kristof noted that the administration is going after their neighbor down the street or somebody they knew at church. The defense relies on the horror of the crimes committed by a few to justify the violation of the rights of the many. That is a failure of the constitutional requirement for due process. We need to understand the legal structure of oversight that is being violated here. This is Article 1 of the Constitution. Representative Raskin reminded the committee that Congress is the lawmaking branch of government. The Constitution gives Congress the power over naturalization and immigration. The president's role is to take care that the laws are faithfully executed. When Congress asks the executive branch for data, specifically, how many U.S. citizens are being detained, the executive branch has a legal obligation to answer truthfully. The oversight function is integral to the ability to pass laws. If the executive branch lies to Congress, it breaks the mechanism of checks and balances. Furthermore, we must understand the Fourth Amendment implications. Representative Johnson described the current legal reality as a caste system. The Supreme Court has allowed law enforcement to use race and appearance as a factor in immigration stops. However, the Fourth Amendment still protects citizens from unreasonable search and seizure. When ICE agents ram a door without a warrant, as described by Representative Jayapal, they are violating the Fourth Amendment. A warrant requires probable cause, supported by oath or affirmation, describing the place to be searched and the persons to be seized. ICE is operating in many of these cases without judicial warrants, relying instead on administrative warrants that do not grant the authority to enter a private home without consent. This is a fundamental breach of the Bill of Rights. Finally, we have the concept of asylum. Under U.S. law and international treaty, a person on U.S. soil has the right to claim asylum. Representative Roy argues that asylum claims do not give someone the right to roam freely. However, due process requires that their claim be heard. Deporting someone while their claim is adjudicated is a violation of that statutory right. It is my professional judgment that Secretary Kristi Noem is unfit to hold office and that her conduct constitutes a dereliction of duty. Secretary Noem has displayed a complete disregard for congressional oversight. She has failed to testify before the Judiciary Committee despite the requirement that her subordinate, the USCIS director, appear. She left a previous oversight hearing after only 2 hours, claiming she had a meeting that had actually been canceled. She has provided false information to Congress regarding the detention of citizens. She has publicly cited statistics that independent journalists and data analysts, such as those at the New York Times, have exposed as fabricated. Nicholas Kristof, a Pulitzer Prize winner, stated that Noem concocted non-existent facts, claiming people had committed crimes when the majority had not. Furthermore, the moral judgment of the administration is in question. Representative Van Drew of New Jersey expressed that it is weird and perverse and bizarre that Democrats care about the people being detained rather than the victims of crimes. This displays a fundamental misunderstanding of the role of government. The government must protect victims of crime, yes, but the government must also not become the criminal. As Representative Raskin retorted, this is a case of moral dyslexia. The same people who defend the pardoning of January 6 rioters, people who assaulted police officers, are now demanding absolute immunity for federal agents who shoot women in the street. Secretary Noem's refusal to answer questions, her agency's falsification of data, and the deployment of untrained AI-selected agents into American cities represents a collapse of professional law enforcement standards. This judgment is supported by a stack of expert authorities. We have Representative Emily Randall, who has personally conducted 5 oversight visits to detention centers. She has witnessed the conditions firsthand. We have Nicholas Kristof, a Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist with experience covering authoritarian regimes. He compares the current tactics, making things up, offering statistics with no backing, to the regimes he has covered abroad. We have the actions of Mr. Thompson, Mr. Jacobs, and Ms. Williams. These are not pundits. These are senior federal prosecutors. Mr. Thompson was appointed by Donald Trump. His resignation is the loudest possible expert testimony that the Justice Department has crossed a legal and ethical line. We have the testimony of Mayor Jacob Frey of Minneapolis, the executive in charge of the city's safety, who states unequivocally that the federal presence is causing chaos, not safety. We have the documentation from the New York Times and NBC News confirming the lack of training and the targeting of non-criminals. Where is the accountability? The Department of Justice is failing. Instead of investigating the shooting of Renee Nicole Good, they are attempting to investigate her widow. They are refusing to include state officials in the investigation of whether the shooting was lawful. This is an institutional blockade of justice. The courts are the last line of defense, but they are moving slowly. Representative Johnson noted that the Supreme Court has enabled this behavior through its rulings on immigration stops. The House of Representatives attempted to enforce accountability. Representative Raskin introduced an amendment. The amendment was simple. It stated that a specific section of the immigration bill would not take effect until Secretary Noem testified before the committee. It was a demand for basic oversight. It was a demand that the Secretary of Homeland Security show her face and answer questions under oath. The committee voted on that amendment. We have the record of that vote. The amendment failed. The Republicans on the committee voted in a block to protect Secretary Noem from testifying. Mr. Jordan voted no. Mr. Biggs voted no. Mr. McClintock voted no. Mr. Massey voted no. Mr. Roy voted no. Mr. Gates voted no. Representative Hageman, who read the list of crimes, voted no. The final vote was 11 ayes and 18 noes. Because of this vote, Secretary Noem is not required to testify. Because of this vote, the funding and the authority for these operations continue without check. The procedural consequence is that the dragnet expands. The 11th Airborne remains on standby for deployment to American streets. The agents with the least training will continue to be deployed with masks and weapons. And the United States citizens who are detained, the teenagers at Target, the constituents in Maryland, have no recourse in the legislative branch because the majority has decided that oversight is optional. The government is lying to Congress. Congress has voted to let them keep lying, and the prosecutors who tried to stop it have resigned. That is the state of the law tonight. This content reflects my personal opinion and analysis based on publicly available information. It is not intended to promote hate, harassment, or harm toward any individual, group, or political party. The purpose of this video is news commentary, critical analysis, and public discussion under fair use. If you want deeper context, verified sources, and clearer breakdowns of these political developments, watch the related videos on this channel. I don't do surface-level takes here. Subscribe and explore the full playlist to understand the complete picture, not just headlines.